Welcome to another video from your Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. This one is on the 950 Pro, and I bet you some of you have picked one of these up, being it's the fastest commercially available hard drive SSD currently out there, and is substantially faster than SATA SSDs, up to about 4 or 5 times. But the question is, what am I going to do with this drive, especially since I already have my Windows 10 installed on an SSD? Well, we're going to investigate that. In this video, we'll look at cloning from the 840 Evo Samsung drive, which my Windows 10 is currently on, to the 950 Pro. And I have the 256 gigabyte version of the 950 Pro here, not the 512. I know it's slightly faster. It's also more expensive. I don't really need the 512, honestly, for my operating system. And the other one, the 840 Evo, is slightly smaller at 250 gigabytes. So this makes it convenient because the target drive is slightly smaller or slightly larger than the current source drive where Windows 10 is, which is avoiding shrinking the volume, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Now the issue is, and that I've read on the internets, is this: do I need to use a GPT partition table? Now GPT is the GUID partition table. That's the partitioning that allows you to make boot drives up to 2 terabytes. So that's recent with Windows 10. In fact, Windows 10 is the only operating system that can use GPT, as I understand it. So, do I need to use GPT partition table on the 950 Pro and reinstall Windows 10 in UEFI mode? And this comes up a lot in some of the forums, such as in Tom's Hardware, where people have run into problems with moving from an SSD, Windows 10 and SSD, to the new 950 Pro if you want to just clone, or they may have had to reinstall. So the question I asked was, can I simply clone my current SSD, 840 Evo, using the master boot record partition table, or the MBR partition table, which is what everybody has been using all along? So we're going to answer that question today and see whether it worked. And the short answer is yes, it worked perfectly. And so you don't have to worry about it, but I'll show you what I did. Okay, so you can go to Tom's Hardware and other forums to see about this issue and read up about what these two partition tables mean and how you actually go about setting them. I'll show a little bit about that in this video, however. Okay, here's the system, just for information. Your Emperor's system includes a lot of fancy stuff, but ostensibly for today, we're looking at moving from the 840 Evo, where the Windows is on 250 gigabyte, to the Samsung 950 Pro NVMe, which is 6 gigabytes larger. So that's what we're working with today. Now, one thing, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the installation of the M2 drive. Unfortunately, I should have been smart enough to take the video while I was installing it, but what you need to know for the Asus Z170 boards, including the Deluxe, is there are 2 screws for the M2 drive. One is a standoff screw, and one is the actual screw to hold the M2 drive down onto the motherboard. So you put the standoff screw on first. And so this is the Asus, this is probably the Deluxe or the Pro board. But the 950 Pro extends as far as the 3rd screw. So you put the standoff screw on first in here, then you install the M2 drive, which will actually sit up on about a 45-degree angle, because it's kind of flexy, so it'll sit up on an angle like this, but you push it down and then you use the other screw to actually fasten it to the standoff screw. So you don't need the standoff screw, but I would recommend you use it because the board, then the M2 drive, is slightly bent without it. Anyway, just a small thing to keep in mind. Now, here are my suggested steps, and I've done it this way so that you can have this as a more of a permanent record. I think the first thing you should do is make a system image using your favorite cloning software. I just use Windows, the backup and restore function in Windows 7, but now more evident in Windows 10, and store this on a different drive than the 2 drives involved in the cloning, just in case. Then so you have that, and then download and install Samsung Magician migration software version 3 from Samsung's site. Now, I'm working with two Samsung drives, so it works perfectly. I think it still will work without this another Samsung drive because I cloned my wife's hard drive in her laptop using the migration software onto a Samsung drive, and it worked fine. I'm not absolutely sure about that, but you can check it out. Anyway, we're working with two Samsung drives today. First thing to do, these little red bits are important. Update your BIOS to the latest version just to ensure compatibility with M.2 drives, just in case there's been improvements and issues there. Then install the M.2 drive using the standoff screw, as I mentioned, for the Z170 boards for Asus. And then once you've done that, power up the computer and ensure the M.2 drive is detected in the BIOS. Make sure it's there, you see it. Otherwise, don't go any further. There's something wrong. So you should see it. I had no issues. It was detected easily by the latest BIOS version. And I'm using version 1702, I think it is, for the Asus Z170 boards, or version 17. It's the latest BIOS anyway. So boot into Windows after that, in this case Windows 10. Now, of course, the 950 Pro will not be initialized or formatted, so you have to do this first before you start the cloning. So initialize the 950 Pro in disk management, in Windows Disk Management, and you could just right-click on the Windows icon in the corner, left-hand corner of the desktop, and you will get the selection for disk management. And you then want to initialize a drive as master boot record, or if previously your old drive was initialized initialized as a GPT drive, then you should keep that the same. But mine was an old MBR format, which is what everybody has been using. So I kept that the same because I wanted to see if this was going to work. Now, you may need to shrink the volume of your drive to fit the M.2 drive if needed. In my case, my 950 Pro was a little bit bigger than my 840 Evo, so I was good to go. But if you're the other way around, you may need to shrink the volume of your drive to a size that will fit on the 950 Pro. So do that first so that you can ensure that you'll be able to transfer the cloning. Now, then you format the drive as standard NTFS as usual, and you're good to go. Now, then the Windows will see the drive and it'll be empty and so forth, so you're fine. In step 10 here, now you run the migration software using selecting the 950 Pro as the target drive. And for me, this only took about 3 minutes and a half, and transferred at about the real world transfer speed from the 840 Evo limiting step of about 480 megabits per second. So that was fast, relatively fast. I mean, this took 3 minutes and a half. So don't go away from your computer. I went away for a bit and I came back and went, oh, this is almost done. So yeah, it won't take long. Shut down your PC. Actually, the migration software will force you to shut it down, and disconnect your old C drive, in my case the 840, or disable it in the BIOS from the boot sequence, so it's not part of the boot sequence at all. Otherwise, it could screw up your boot up procedure because the computer is seeing two sources of Windows 10, and if it's booting from both of them, it may screw things up. It may not, but especially if the 950 Pro is first. But nevertheless, just be safe. Just disconnect it or take it out of the boot sequence altogether. And then finally, ensure the 950 Pro is in boot order, is the first in the boot order table in the BIOS. And this was automatically set in my case because now it's become the source, the C drive, so it was set automatically to boot up first. So then boot up your PC, and voila, I had absolutely no hassles. It worked perfectly, even with the MBR partitioning. So I think this is brilliant. I think the migration software worked very well. I've had no issues with it in stability or BSODs or anything. Yeah, it's been great. So I was very impressed. I thought I'd have a lot of hassles with this, but there were none. So just some qualitative performance indices. Okay, 1 day usage so far, so not a lot of experience with it. But I'd say, yeah, boot up time is slightly faster, 1 to 2 seconds. This is inconsequential. So you can check this by checking the BIOS time in the startup tab in the task manager. Yeah, Windows 10 is a bit snappier. It is. Overall, this is not something you would really do. I think this switch for a lot of performance game in as your operating system. It's kind of like an enthusiast's piece of equipment that really doesn't have a huge impact on things. So I might switch the 950 Pro back to my Steam drive for games which have longer file sizes and which might benefit more from game loading time, or just game loading time. So anyway, that's just some qualitative indices so far. It's not a huge performance increase really. But here's some synthetic benchmarks. First, the 950 Pro empty. Yes, I'm basically getting exactly as specified on the web from various users, up to what? Yeah, 2200 megabits per second on read, and then write is about 1000 megabits per second. So, right, we're getting up to 2 times faster write speeds and 4 times faster read speeds. And when it's loaded, virtually the same. So not a lot of impact with the drive loaded, with about 70 gigabytes of data on it. And then finally, versus the 840 Evo loaded, yeah, this is getting pretty good standard performance, saturating the SATA pipeline, sort of 550 and 550 sort of thing. So yeah, it's faster. Whether it's really noticeable in real world performance, not really. Not a huge difference really. Anyway, I did say I would tell you where to find disk management, and you just go over to the corner, Windows icon, and right click, and then disk management's right there, and it'll pop up this window with all the drives. And right now, of course, my 950 Pro is the C drive. But 2 things I said about shrinking first. Let's say I wanted to shrink a volume just to show you. Let's say, for example, this is one of my disks that is a terabyte, but I only use about half of it. So if I want to shrink it, I would just right click and hit shrink, and I could shrink it down from practically a terabyte to almost half that size. So that's the idea. That's what you want to do before you clone, if you have to. About GPT and MBR, a window will pop up here when you first have a new driver that's never been formatted, or if you've secured a raster drive and then stuck it back in your system. But ostensibly, it sees convert to GPT. I can't in this case. You can't do that. But you will have this option to make the drive MBR or GPT upon initialization, and that's what you should do. In terms of Samsung cloning or data migration software, or cloning, whatever, no, you just boot this up, and then you will have the option to select the target drive. In this case, my 950 Pro is not showing because now it's the source drive, but you would have a series of drives here to select from. That's all you have to do. So it's very straightforward, great software, and I highly recommend using it to clone Samsung drives or other drives.